And now it is my pleasure to welcome back to the stage our host, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, and joining him will be Sir Richard Branson, who is the founder of the Virgin Group.
Hello. Sir Richard, welcome to the Copenhagen Democracy Summit. You don't need a lot of introduction. As you all know, you founded Virgin back in 1970, and since then it has expanded into many diverse sectors, and you have generated a lot of money. I recently saw your interview with CNBC where you said that business should be about achieving more than just making money, making a difference in other people's lives. That's all that really matters. And I couldn't agree more. Could you elaborate a bit on that? What advice would you give to all the activists and freedom fighters here? How can they make the biggest difference possible?
Well, first of all, it's great to talk to you, and well done on this really worthwhile conference. So I think the most important thing is to never accept the unacceptable. We must all stand up against the growing division, oppression, and suffering in the world. I've been a relentless optimist, I think, all my life, and optimism and hope are among the most powerful forces I know. I was lucky enough to know Archbishop Tutu, and he used to say, if I can remember rightly, hope is being able to see that there is light despite the darkness. He's a man of many wise words. So never stop believing in your ability to be effective. Never lose hope that things will get better. Just look around you in your room in Copenhagen, talk to the people around you. There is so much that you share in common, and there is so much that we can do to support you. Now, the good news is that you don't have to go it alone. It's important to surround yourself with smart and committed people. And I think the whole approach of Virgin Unite, our foundation, has been to bring together the greatest minds to solve some of the world's absolutely toughest challenges. And it's led to the establishment of brilliant collectives such as the Elders, the B Team, the Carbon War Room, and more recently, the Planetary Guardians. The cause of freedom and democracy is truly universal. It unites people in every corner of the world. So don't forget that you have vocal and influential allies who will forever be your voice.
Thank you. You have actually shown that good business can also be based on values. How do we convince business leaders that freedom and democracy is good for the bottom line?
Well, I mean, businesses don't operate in a vacuum. And from armed conflict, from oppression to the triple planetary crisis, climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, the world is not short of material challenges. For business to thrive in the long term, we depend on stability, we depend on good governance, we depend on transparency, we depend on fairness, and maybe most importantly of all, we depend on the rule of law. Whether those things are threatened or where they're non-existent, the risks are just too great. And I think it's important to bear in mind that these are both operational and reputational risks. So think that if we can change business for good, we can and we must do our part to change the world for the better. If we can lobby for our own interests, we must also be advocates for the greater good. Those really are two sides of the same coin. Since I started in business in the 1960s, an awful long time ago, I've always used my voice to speak out on causes that I and my associates are passionate about, whether it was ending the war in Vietnam, a most unjust war, all the way back then, or trying to stop the West's invasion of Iraq and Libya, and more recently, ending the war on drugs, abolishing the death penalty worldwide, or standing up for the people of Ukraine and Iran. And I believe every business leader should speak out. How do we do it? Well, we have reach. We have access. I'm lucky enough to be able to pick up the phone and get through to people. I must use it. We have resources. And we must use them to bring about positive change for Ukraine, for justice, and obviously for the planet as well.
Turning to Russia, Ukraine, as you mentioned, too many companies continue to profit from doing business with or in Russia, whilst fueling Putin's war machine. So, what is your message to those businesses, and how do you think consumers and politicians should react or respond to these companies still operating in Russia?
With anger. At the outset of the war, Virgin Businesses and our foundation, Virgin Unite, I think stepped up very early on to provide support to the people of Ukraine. And I felt early on that business in the West must stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine, must condemn any form of Russian aggression, and must support the strongest of sanctions. As a B team leader, I joined many of my peers to sign an open letter condemning the invasion and stating that we would only consider resuming suspended business and investment activities in Russia when hostile operations had completely ceased and when peace was restored. Businesses, I think, must divest from Russia, and they must divest from its interests. I think too many companies continue to profit from doing business with or in Russia. Doing business in and with Russia is still overlooked in I think, so many different ways. It's also not sufficiently known just how many loopholes exist. It's completely staggering and it's scandalous. And those that do so, I think, should be exposed and they should be shamed. They should know that what they're doing is directly fueling Putin's war. And it is Putin's war. It's not the Russians' war. It is Putin's war. And politicians must react too. Companies and their leaders doing business in and with Russia must face far more serious legal consequences.
That's a very strong message, I think, to certain business leaders. And as you mentioned, you've been a strong supporter of Ukraine for the past decade, and you've been very active in rallying support. Could you tell us a bit more about why you, as a business leader, felt compelled to take this role, and what more we can do to help Ukraine? You have rallied an impressive list of business leaders and philanthropists to support Ukraine. Is there more we can do to join up efforts of business leaders?
Yes, there's no question that any conflict scenario creates uncertainty, and investors are cautious. They're reluctant to put investment at risk. Now, these risks, I think, must be addressed and mitigated. For instance, one way would be through greater access to comprehensive war insurance. We at Virgin have had the good fortune since the start of the war to partner with the Howard Buffett Foundation and the Bridgeway Foundation, who have helped mobilize over $1 billion for Ukraine. And they have done a brilliant job working with partners to help keep the agricultural sector operating, to support demining and rebuilding efforts, and much, much more. We've collaborated closely with them on a number of fronts, including with two amazing partners, There's the Global Empowerment Mission, who are rebuilding communities. They're creating hundreds of local jobs, and they're getting urgent supplies to people living on the front lines. And there's a wonderful organization called Superhumans, who have built a state-of-the-art prosthetics and rehabilitation hospital for wounded victims of war. If you're wounded, you need to get your prosthetics sorted within 2 or 3 weeks while your arm and your legs are still reacting to it. So really important to have such a hospital. Lee Schreiber has also set up a wonderful initiative called Blue Check that allows people all over the world to get funds directly to frontline organizations across Ukraine to address issues and to create jobs. But for Western business to really commit to helping Ukraine rebuild, we must first win the war. And in the last couple of weeks, there has been a well-publicized setback. All of us need to be on the same war footing as if our own countries were being invaded. What do Ukraine troops need today? We need to ask ourselves. Tomorrow, we need to ask ourselves, how fast can we get them their weapons? How can one stop Russia's missiles getting through? And so on and so on. We really need to put ourselves in their shoes and give them what they need, as if it was our own shoes on the ground. They are really fighting for us all.
I think that's spot on. I mean, Russia's war machine is now up and running. Its ability to keep churning out troops and machinery is hard to match for Ukraine. So we need to match Russia. So what role could business play here? How can we, in concrete terms, bring our economies on a war footing?
Well, look, I think it's really important to realize that the West is much, much stronger than Russia. Ukraine can and will win if we are as one. The US, the UK, and the EU have a combined economy which is, I think, something like 25 times that of Russia. And I think that we have a military spending which is something like 15 times greater. And it will require around, I think, 0.5% of our GDPs. If we don't spend that, we could end up spending a lot more than that, and we could end up having boots on the grounds ourselves. So it's money very, very, very worthwhile to spend. Russia, on the other hand, has been paying a much heavier price. I mean, defense spending for them has gone up to 40%, and it's something like 6% of its GDP. So the outcome of this war is entirely down to our collective will and our political will. We need investment at scale to boost Ukraine's defense sector, to build resilience and to reduce reliance on Western military aid. There's been some notable progress through cooperation between allies and Ukraine on artillery, long-range weapons and drones. However, much more can be done to build Ukraine's defense technological and industrial base. But all this does require government support, and we need to de-risk investments by, I think, providing conflict insurance. I think that really is pretty critical. Government should also reduce barriers to defense technology transfer and shared R&D. But overall, I think all of us in the West, but particularly in Europe, must acknowledge that we live in a vastly different world with serious threats to our security, to our stability, and to our prosperity. And most important of all, having listened to your talk and having lived a long life, to our freedom. Only about 20% of the world's population are still able to say that they live in truly free nations. Democracy and freedom are sadly on the decline. And that's worth remembering every day, but it's also worth fighting for.
I think you're right, and it leads me to my last question. In your lifetime has focused on how to do well by doing good. And we have a large audience here who are all trying to do something to change the world, to support freedom and democracy. What gives you optimism about the future of freedom and democracy?
Well, freedom and democracy have proven to be the strongest drivers of prosperity the world has ever seen. Think about Europe after World War II. Think about Eastern Europe after the end of the Cold War. I personally was lucky enough to be at the Berlin Wall when it was pulled down. I never lose hope that they will prevail in the end, but they have to be fought for every single day. And for democracy and freedom to prevail, they have to be supported by good governance. They have to be supported by functioning institutions. They have to be supported by the rule of law. They have to be supported by transparency, fairness, but above all, the will of the people to connect and to collaborate.
Thank you very much, Sir Richard. I admire you as a leading businessman who has proved that it is possible as a business leader to look beyond your own bottom line, take responsibility for broader issues to promote and protect freedom and democracy. We need more of that kind of business leaders. So I would love to see you in person in Copenhagen next year, if it's possible for you, and I can offer you a bike ride if you would like to go to Copenhagen next year. Thank you very much.
I love the bike, so it's very tempting, and I love your country. So thank you for the kind offer, and best to all of you in the room, and thank you for organising this wonderful conference. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.